Good evening, everybody. My name is Casey Neely, and I'm the program coordinator for USJET AA. That's the United States Japan Exchange and Teaching Program Alumni Association. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C. And our mission is to further the US-Japan relationship, as well as to support JET alumni of the JET program. I was also a JET in Kumamoto Prefecture from 2013 to 2015. And I went back to Japan for grad school in Kyoto from 2019 to 2020. I'm very excited today. We have JET, we also have JET alumni. We also have Bridging Scholars in the audience and Bridging Scholar alumni. So welcome everyone. I'd also like to briefly introduce our speakers. We have Dr. Anne Hooghart. We also have Kasia Lynch and Faye Valtadoros. They have all spent time in Japan and have built their careers through their experiences, whether that's through the JET program, the MEX program, through travel, through work. They've all had that experience in Japan and built their careers off of it. Before we begin the webinar tonight, there's also a few things I'd like to mention. Since we've had quite a few interests in this webinar, we will be holding a networking session for those who are interested in pursuing careers in Japanese. This networking session will take place also over Zoom, and we'll be inviting all of our speakers to join, as well as everybody in the audience. It will be on September 1st, that's a Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And for that networking session, we're gonna have breakout sessions in smaller groups based on different industries that people are interested in. So you can talk a little bit more in depth than just this webinar. So I'm gonna go ahead and include the link for this in the chat box. So if you're interested in that, I would definitely go ahead and register for that in advance. Secondly, we also have a upcoming webinar in August. I'm sorry, we have a webinar in September, which will be on careers in the foreign service. This webinar is open to everyone. We will have Karen Kelly, who just finished her time as the Consulate General at the U.S. Embassy in Osaka, speaking, as well as the Cultural and Sports Attaché in the U.S. Embassy Tokyo. And we will also have the former coordinator for Japan and Korea Affairs, the Public Diplomacy Office of the Bureau of East Asian and Pacific Affairs. So that will be on September 9th at 8 p.m. And you also have to register in advance for that as well. And like I said, all of the links for these will be in the chat box. Third, we'd like to let you know that we have a workshop coming up. This is for everyone. This is through the Pacific Northwest JET Alumni chapter. It's called Transitions. It will be a workshop in career and networking, and it will also include things like mentoring workshops and things like that. I don't believe that there's a date for this yet, but I would definitely check out the website if you're interested in attending. And I've also put that link in the chat box. USJET AA will also have career services starting in, I believe, at the end of August. I think it's August 31st, and that will be for career counseling sessions and then a resume workshop course. This will only be for JET alumni. So if you are a JET alumni, I would definitely take advantage of that. If you are a JET alumni, I would also, oh, it looks like, okay, hold on. Looks like we're not seeing those in the chat box. I'm gonna go ahead and post those in the chat box. So if you could hold on 1 second. Okay, I also would like to say if you are a JET alumni and you're not a member of USJET AA, I would encourage you to become a member. It's absolutely free to become a member. You just have to go to the link, the membership link on USJET AA. If you are not a JET alumni, or you are a JET alumni and you like programming like this, we'd also encourage you to donate to USJET AA if you're able. But we know that times are difficult for everyone, so if you're not able to do that, that's okay as well. Okay, now before I turn it over to the speakers, I'm just going to do a couple of housekeeping items. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, you're able to ask questions through the chat box or the Q&A feature. If we go to the next slide, yeah, so this is how you, I'm sure many of you have used Zoom before, but if you're not as familiar, the options should be at the bottom of your computer screen. It's for the chat box and the Q&A, and you can ask questions through either of those functions. And if you're on mobile, you should also have those options, but you might have to like tap the screen a couple of times for them to pop up. I'd also like to let everyone know that we're recording this webinar. So if you're not able to stay for the whole webinar, but you have a question, you should still ask your question, and then you can watch the recording later to see the answer to your question. I think that's all I have for me. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to our speakers. Feel free to ask questions at any time, and we will be answering all of the questions at the end of the webinar.
Unmute. How's this? Can you hear me now? Sounds good. All right, so thank you. This is, my name is Kasia. We'll be doing all the introductions in momentarily, but we are so excited to be here to share our experience, some of the tips that we've learned over the years, and we truly hope that this presentation is helpful to you, whether you are searching for a job or may plan on doing so in the future, or are just here to see what's out there in store for you. So we'll get into some specifics. Overall, here's the flow of the presentation. We're going to do our introductions. We're going to get into some senpai stories so you can hear examples of other people and what they have done with their Japanese language and or cultural skills. We will also get to some job search tips. And finally, we will open the floor up for questions. You can ask us. We are going to be very happy to connect with you. If we don't get to all your questions during this presentation, our information is going to be in the last slide. We will also type our information in the chat so you can see if you need to get a hold of us. We are more than happy to chat about that. So without further ado, we shall get started. And Ann Sensei, let's see here.
Arigatou gozaimasu. So welcome everyone. I saw an answer or a question in the chat box. How many people are participating? There are 3 of us speakers, and I believe there's at least 100 of you participating. So thanks to everyone for joining us. This will be recorded and it can be shared further. So I guess we'll start with self-introductions, and then we'll go into how this started and so on and so forth. As shown on the screen, my name is Ann Hooghart. I was on JET a long time ago, and I think I misremembered it when I gave the information to USJET-AA, or maybe I was trying to appear younger, but I was actually in Shiga for just 1 year, from 1989 to 90. And it was life-changing. I will get into that more later, but I was only going to be in Japan for a year and improve my Japanese skills and jump right into international business. And then, of course, life happened and I ended up being a teacher, and I'm very pleased with that. But anyway, a lot of interesting things have occurred. I am now serving on the board of the Hinoki Foundation, so I got my snazzy virtual background here, and I've been a volunteer with that group for about 6 years now, and just joined the board, and so I'm very excited to do this outreach. We promote, at the Hinoki Foundation, we promote Japanese English bilingualism, particularly for students, K through 12, and a little bit of college and so on. So I guess I can talk about, do you want me to do my bio now, Kasia? So,
sure, I was just, I don't know if I was too late with the slide, so go ahead.
Oh, that's okay, because I didn't know if you wanted me to do, okay. So here's more about me. So I went first to Japan at the age of 16 and completely fell in love with it. I'm a hick from the sticks. I'm from a very rural area in northern Michigan, and wanted to go anywhere else, and was lucky enough to receive a Youth for Understanding scholarship and I spent 7 weeks in the big city of Yokohama of 3 million people for about 7 weeks of a summer between my junior and senior years. Absolutely changed my life. I love the Japanese food, culture, people, language, and decided to study it. And that determined my college choice. At the college I was accepted to, my now husband was also attending, and we now have 2 children, and the whole family is bilingual in Japanese and English. I became a Japanese teacher, as I briefly alluded to, and that led to becoming a professor and a dean, and I've done other things as well, working for Japanese companies, serving as a consultant. I became a translator for a few years, and now I'm mostly an online language teacher. I teach Japanese online, plus I work at the Consulate General of Japan in Detroit in sort of a consulting type position, but in PR and cultural relations. So both my volunteering and my day-to-day jobs involve Japanese language and culture, and I love it. Probably Kasia will be telling you more about Ikigai because her company is called Ikigai Connections. But Ikigai, if you're not familiar, is a Japanese term meaning the thing that you wake up in the morning to do, your passion in life, the thing that you're excited about. And what Kasia is passionate about is helping people try to connect their Ikigai with something they do to make a living. So we're very happy to be with you here today.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Kasia Lynch. As Anne so kindly introduced, my company name is Ikigai Connections because I've basically created a company based on my experiences looking for a job using my Japanese language skills. And so all of that, it was a very long process, but I learned so much, and I hope to share my troubles, my problems, my issues, but in a better way, and give you the tips and tricks to keep moving forward and find your dream job. But all that started in high school, actually. I started learning Japanese. I went abroad in my senior year, my first semester. And so basically I've been studying Japanese for over 26 years. I also know Polish, as is written on the slide, and I think that's offered me some interesting opportunities with my languages. But total, I lived in Japan for 8 years. I still love Japan. There's so much about the country that I appreciate. And I was able to use my Japanese language skills in Japan, Poland, Italy, and the United States. And I find that it makes, I think knowing the Japanese language and culture makes you different, makes you stand out. So that is my Ikigai. That's the thing that I really want to do. I want to help others who I meet who tell me, oh, I love Japanese, but I can't really use it in a job, can I? And then I just hear these things over and over and over. I've been hearing them for decades, and I keep telling people, yes, you can. Anything you want to do, nothing is impossible. So that's basically me in a nutshell. I'm very much into karaoke, which is a big, big thing. I love it. Too bad that the pandemic is here, because even here in Michigan, we have some karaoke places. But my Ikigai, the thing that I really enjoy doing besides connecting people, is puzzles and maybe some karaoke and reading and enjoying some quiet inaka life. So that's me. And we will now move on to the next guest speaker.
Hi, I'm Faye Valtadoros. I am a Japanese teacher. I teach 6th through 12th grade. So I teach them when they're young all the way through high school. As you can see there, I teach at Clarkston High School. I'm also at the junior high and the middle school. I started studying Japanese in high school, like Kasia did. And it was difficult at times, but I've learned to love it. I am a lover of languages. I grew up in a bilingual household. So I spoke Greek and English in the household, and then obviously moving on with Japanese, like Kasia, I am trilingual. I've been a learner of Japanese for over 20 years, and I'm still a learner of Japanese. So it's just one of those things that you just don't stop learning about. So I lived in Japan for 3 years. I did 1 year study abroad in college, which was amazing. And then 2 years on jet, both times I was in Kagawa Ken. If you like inaka, you like Kagawa. Or if you like udon, you'd like it even more. I am a 3rd year Jet AA USA country rep. So what we do is we help the chapters in the US, help them with any problems they're having, or giving them ideas, or just giving them support, any kind of support that they need. My Ikigai is teaching about Japan and Japanese. I love what I do. Sometimes, you know, instead of a lesson, my students want to learn about Japanese culture, and we just kind of stick with it and go with it. And I love to talk. I like to talk about everything and anything under the sun. Thanks for coming today.
All right, so now Ann Sensei, if you'd like to continue with introducing this.
Certainly. So thank you, Kasia-san and Faye-san. And also, someone asked, and all three of us happen to live in Michigan, but we believe these stories apply in many, many ways. And we'll be talking about people from all over, and we hope you can use them wherever you are. We wanted to do a little background because where all this started, Kasia and Faye and I kind of knew each other because we were all in Michigan and involved with Japanese and so on. But last year, it was last summer, it just so happened, whether you believe in synchronicity or not, Kasia had an idea and I had an idea, and we both told somebody about it, and they kind of connected us. We were both thinking we need to work with younger people, specifically high schoolers, and she was thinking more college students, but you know, young people, saying we have a very big need for people to become bilingual in Japanese and English, become knowledgeable about Japanese culture, and you can use these skills in a profession, in a career. And so we both had, you know, kind of these similarities, and we said, well, let's work on this together. And what happened was we added people and networked with people like Faye and professional translators, interpreters. Pretty soon we had, I don't know, a dozen people, Kasia, who wanted to come and help us go to classrooms. We called it the Hinoki Cup Road Show, and we took this Japanese Jobs 101 on the road, and we would go to college campuses or K-12 classrooms like Faye Sensei's. She took us to 3 different schools in her town, and we just had a wonderful time talking about, well, this is what I've done with Japanese. And it really opened a lot of eyes. I don't know, wherever you are, I feel like in the US, we don't do a fantastic job of vocational guidance for students. There tends to be a, just go to college and figure it out kind of attitude. And that's very expensive and also very difficult. And, you know, what can I say? But I feel like we gave them some actual examples of ourselves and others that could maybe spark something. And so anyway, we had a wonderful time. We visited how many schools, Kasia? In about a half a year, it was dozens. And we reached 1,000 students who took part in our presentation. So we were thrilled. It was a wonderful response, and we were very happy to be part of it. So, is there anything else I should add, Kasia?
Yeah, I think we're good. I think it's just helpful to know that when we traveled and we talked to all these students and teachers, people didn't realize that their love of Japan and Japanese could actually be something they can continue throughout their lives. And so I think that's why we have this next section, because there's so many ways you can use your skills, whether they're just the cultural or the language, and whether it's, you know, because you've lived overseas and you have experienced what it's like to have to, you know, pay your bills in a foreign language and try to find something that you know, you don't know how to find it, and you don't know who to ask for. Like, those are skills that are really helpful in any kind of job, even if you don't want to use Japanese in a career. So, but we can go ahead and Ann Sensei, if you want to start off the senpai stories, you can give some more clear details.
Thank you. So one thing that Kasia has in her blogs that she produces as part of Ikigai Connections is senpai stories, I believe they're called. If you remember, a sensei is a teacher, but a senpai is a person who goes before you, right? We don't have a great equivalent in English. You have senpai, and then younger than you is kohai. But so these are stories of senpai, people who've kind of been there before you, walked before you. And so the first one we'll start out and share with you and just see if there's anything that clicks or connects with you. We know of a librarian. She is a lover of manga and anime. And she became a librarian and got a job at a public library here in a town that happens to have quite a few Japanese, but also other international residents. And she found ways to persuade her employer to make her the international librarian, I think is her title. And what she does as part of her job is she selects manga, imports manga, chooses them, publicizes them, teaches Americans about manga and how to appreciate them, and so on and so forth. So it is like a dream job, and she basically created it for herself. And how about the next senpai story? Maybe Kasia?
Yes, so this story has to do with the importance of networking. So networking can come in many forms, but this gentleman happened to still be on his JET program, and he was at an izakaya, which most of us probably enjoy and have been to many in their past. So he was there, and he noticed that there were some people coming that didn't speak the language. So he realized they needed some help with the Japanese language. He went over to them, introduced them, kind of helped them out with their order, and started talking with them. Turns out they were from his home state. They're on a business trip. He got to know them. They said, hey, you're coming back to the States. Here, give us a call. You know, we can hook you up with an interview. He got an interview, got the job, is using his Japanese language and cultural skills. And this all happened because of some networking in an izakaya. So don't ever underestimate, you know, you're always building and creating relationships wherever you are. And it's just, it could even lead to a job opportunity. So, hi, Faye Sensei.
So our next story, the teacher of Japanese who didn't even like Japanese when they started learning it. This is my story. As I told you, I grew up in a bilingual household, and when I was in high school, it was the big Japan boom in Michigan, and my mother made me take Japanese. And you know, being an angsty teenager, I didn't want to take it. I mean, I already spoke 2 languages. Why do I need to learn a third? And I purposefully did not do great my first year because I didn't want to be in it. But I stuck with it for the 3 years that it was offered. And I went to Japan my senior year. And it was then that things just clicked. I went on the Michigan boat, and I saw this guy selling phone cards, a guy from Michigan. And I'm like, that is so cool. I am never going to be like that guy. I'm never going to be that good like that guy. Well, lo and behold, 3 years later, I go to Japan and I study abroad, and I worked in a restaurant. So I wasn't selling phone cards, but I was a waitress and going to school. And that, it just goes to show you that even if you don't like something in the beginning, give it a chance. Just try it. It's kind of like when they say when you go to Japan and you're offered something that you don't want to eat, just try it. Just give it a chance and see what you think. It's kind of like this with experiences in life. And this experience, I mean, going for those 2 weeks with my high school to Japan was honestly life altering. As I said before, I ended up doing 3 years in Japan, and now I teach Japanese and I take my students every other summer. So it's definitely led me to my career.
Awesome.
So the next story is almost a cautionary tale. This is a person who I shall not name, but she actually went on the JET program with me back in the day. And she was a very ambitious person. Her family, I think she might have been the first one in college, but she was certainly the first one to attend University of Michigan, which is very highly selective. And she knew from a very early age that she had to go to University of Michigan so that she could get into a good law school. Because when she was about 5 or 6, someone was asking her, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she said, I want to be a lawyer. And they said, oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, you should do that. Great, great, great. And so she continued to follow that path. She went to the good high school so she could get the good grades, go to the good university, and get into law school. And she did get into law school. She became a tax lawyer, and she hated it. So the cautionary tale is she let a 6-year-old make her vocational decision. And the other thing she didn't do is continue to go back and say, is that really my Ikigai? Is that still my Ikigai? Like, is this my thing? And unfortunately, she found out too late. I mean, I don't know what she's doing right now. I should really go look her up. But you may have been in love with this idea at one time, but please continually re-examine, I guess, the story, the moral of the story.
Thank you. The second example, though, is this is actually, there was an intern that I had a while back, and I gave her many assignments related to Japan and Japanese language. Her language level was extremely high. So she did all these things during her summer internship, and I even gave her this big translation project that definitely, I mean, she wanted to do it. It was something intriguing, and we talked about it afterwards when her internship ended, and I said, so what'd you think about that? And she's like, you know what? I actually don't think I liked the translation. And I said, good, because you need, and this is the lesson from this story, is that you need to try things to see if you like it. You may have in your mind this idea that, oh, I need to be a translator or interpreter, but you won't know anything about it until you actually take steps to do that. It doesn't matter how old you are. You have to try different things, and perhaps even the same kind of task in different industries, but you just need to take steps to learn more about it instead of just having this idea in your mind. So this is motivation to anybody. If you have any ideas, just take one at a time and see if it's something that you actually enjoy doing. You may end up thinking like, oh, no, this is definitely not for me. Or you may want to dig deeper and realize, yeah, this is a direction I want to go in. So just a little bit of advice. It's good if you find something that you don't care for, because it helps your path with the next step.
Mm-hmm.
Our next story is about somebody who was on the JET program. He was there with his wife, and due to them being there technically like different times, they kind of overlapped their times. They were there for 6 years. They came back to Michigan together and with their 2-year-old daughter. And they moved in with her parents, and he didn't have a job. He ended up going to a returnees reception, a JET returnees reception. And he overheard that the Japanese consulate was looking for a position. And he pretty much just got that job. Sometimes it just happens. If you hear about it and you know someone who's in there, like he knew the JET coordinator, he was able to get into this position. And the Japanese language wasn't necessarily a necessity, but talking socially with the diplomats, it's always nice to know some Japanese and to continue, the culture and stuff. And that's how he got his first job back in Michigan.
Wow.
Awesome, thank you. So this is our last slide of the Senpai stories. And Ann Sensei, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you. Yes, these are all true stories. So someone had typed in the chat about families can also influence or try to pressure you, or, try to help you decide, I guess. And my answer to that is, is it your life or is it your family's life? So, that's a pretty flip answer. But if this is what you're going to do for your 8, 10, 12 waking hours a day, please, I hope you'll do it for yourself. For me, it was almost the opposite. People had told me, my family and my friends all my life, oh, you should be a teacher. You'd be a really good teacher. And I thought, no, I don't want to be a teacher. That's not sexy. You don't make a lot of money. Who wants to be a teacher? So I actively avoided it. All through college, I wanted to be an international business major, and I eventually was a Japanese studies major, but I knew that was going to be used in business because, again, as Faye Sensei mentioned, that was when it was called the Nihongo boom. You could just make $1 million, become a translator, interpreter, whatever it may be. And so that's the path I thought I'd go on. And of course, as time went on, every time I got a job, it would be related to teaching, right? So I got this wonderful JET opportunity to live in Japan for a year, and I happened to be paired with this most excellent English teacher, Japanese English teacher, and I feel like I did my student teaching with her. She taught me so much about teaching and was just a wonderful person. And so then I came back to the US and I got a job at a Japanese auto parts company, and what they wanted me to do was teach their executives English and teach their American employees Japanese. So again, I was teaching. And then I changed from that to another position. I was going to be doing some consulting and so on. I wanted to get a master's degree. I got the master's degree and no businesses were hiring, but the local school district said, we don't have our Japanese teacher. They had to go back because their visa didn't work or something. Can you please teach? And I said, oh, just for 1 year. 5 years later, I had 150 students. The program started with 10, and I had 20 on the waiting list. So I thought, there's something to this teaching thing. And so I finally got my teaching certificate, became a teacher, and a professor and never looked back. It's really turned out to be. And so my Ikigai, which I actively resisted from a young age, actually I learned later that's what I actually love to do. So thank you.
Awesome, awesome. So the next example here on this slide is there was a jet who returned home and just missed talking in Japanese and would take these Japanese lessons, but it wasn't so much conversation, and that's what she really craved. So she decided to create her own conversation, like, you know, group with people. And at first it started off as a hobby. It was something she was doing just locally, but then she put it online and she started getting requests from people all around the world. And lo and behold, after many years of doing that, her hobby became an actual business. So this one required a little bit of entrepreneurial spirit. And she's on her 6th year and going strong, and says that she just can't imagine not doing this. There was a need and she found a way to fill that need, and she's happy. So that one took a little bit of a unique twist, but nothing is impossible, like I say.
Before I start with our final story, I just want to say Anne is an amazing teacher.
So are you, Faye Sensei? I've seen you teach.
You are definitely an amazing teacher. So our final story is again about a jet who was coming back home with his wife back to Michigan, and neither of them had jobs lined up. So they came back and his wife found one. Company was looking for an HR person that spoke Japanese, do some translating. So they go, and she goes to apply for it because she's perfect for this job. And they happened to talk to him as well. And they said, well, we might have a position open for you. And, you know, he's looking for a job. So he got a job as well in the purchasing department, but he ended up also doing some translating for his boss. So even though he didn't necessarily go in for a Japanese translating job, he ended up doing that on the side along with his purchasing job. So again, it just goes to show that you just never know. You just might end up in the right place at the right time.
Awesome. Thank you, Faye Sensei and Sensei, for those stories. And now we are in our last section before we get to Q&A. And here's where we're going to give you some job search tips. And everybody who's on this call, we realize you are in different stages in your life. So these tips are a little bit more generic, but we do believe that you will still get some advice. You'll be able to get some pointers from this advice as well. So there are 6 tips, and I'll start with the first one. So the first one is obviously something I'm also very passionate about, is to figure out your current Ikigai. So Ikigai is something that you really enjoy doing. Let's say, for example, you want to become a medical doctor, but you also have an Ikigai that's related to Japan. My point is you can absolutely find something that's connected to both of them. You don't just have to have one or the other. So I always help people brainstorm ways of getting there. You have to kind of think outside the box sometimes, but it's truly possible to find a job that you enjoy. And I believe it's important for us to enjoy what we like to do. Like Ann Sensei was saying, you're going to work there 8 to 10 hours a day. You might as well enjoy it. So a couple of tips about Ikigai though, and these are things that I often repeat. There is no correct answer. What I liked in my Ikigai as a teenager is different in my 20s and 30s and now my 40s. So you have to, just like number 2 says, subject to change, allow yourself to change, because we are humans, we learn. Japan especially it just probably blew your mind with so many different things that you now like. So allow yourself, just kind of go with the flow and see where your interests are lying right now. And one way I recommend that you do is just to kind of get quiet, maybe journal. Some people like to meditate. Find a way to try to learn a little bit better what it is. Now you have to test it by taking action in any direction. So whether you take a part-time job, an internship, you maybe take a course online, or you find a mentor, or something like I did is I found some people who are already in that business and I talk with them and say, tell me about your day in a life. What does it look like? I did that so many times with various Ikigai at the time. And I realized, no, that's not my Ikigai. I don't think I'm interested in that particular area. So you have to test it out. And finally, you have to reevaluate periodically. It's allowed to change. I give you permission if nobody else is giving you that permission. So if you have any other questions on this topic, of course, feel free to reach out to me. I love to talk about this. So that's the first tip. And now we'll go on to tip number 2 with Ann Sensei. Onegai shimasu.
Hi, our second of 6 job tips is do your research. Well, what does that mean? You're the one who wants the job, and we are moving, I guess, for better or for worse, from what used to be kind of a seller's market. I mean, there was 2% unemployment where I live for a while, but now we are with a pandemic and economic changes looking at more of a buyer's market. So you really need to be on the ball if you're going to find your perfect position. Some of the things to consider are, and we have this wonderful thing called the internet now, right? Think about where do you want to be? So what do you want to use? There's a whole bunch of variables and factors that can help you narrow down your search. You should take the effort to go and learn about industries and companies using Japanese and English, or maybe you're one of these people like some of our panelists who are trilingual or have another cultural interest. Or maybe you're saying, you know, I don't really want to use Japanese language, but I love this international idea, right? There's lots of global companies. Look into that. You want a certain field or industry, perhaps, right? Are you more interested in, you know, health-related industry, or more education-related, or private sector, public sector? You know, try to get some up-to-date information about these industries. And also, you might have a specific geographical area. Are you ready to move? Do you want to just live anywhere? Do you want to live in North America? Do you want to live in Asia? You know, where in each of those places? Do you want to live, you know, where you grew up? I mean, there's all kinds of options now as we're learning in this ultra online world that we live in today, right? The networking, we cannot emphasize enough. You can network in person, which is of course ideal, but again, given a pandemic, it might not happen as well. Maybe you can do a one-on-one Zoom, but also networking online can be very helpful. And one example is LinkedIn, but there are many examples, right? Does your university have an alumni association? Probably a lot of those people have jobs. Some of them may be hiring, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So please do your research, be ready to talk intelligently about that field or industry or company as it may be. There's lots of information out there, you just have to go dig it up. Okay, how about Faye Sensei?
Job search number 3, do basic prep. Get a resume, and I say, Deb, get it checked, get it double checked. Having someone proofread it, but also making sure you have everything that needs to be in there. You need to have the vital information. Meishi, I always say Meishi are very important to have. I always carry my Meishi around, and I network like crazy. Yeah, I have a career, but it never hurts to just network and pass out the Meishi and get to know people in different businesses, in different industries, because that's going to be helpful in life one day. LinkedIn profiles. LinkedIn is professional, so it's not Facebook, it's not Instagram, it's more professional. So make sure you keep your LinkedIn more professional and keep it focused on the job aspect. I know somebody, my brother actually, who got on LinkedIn and sent his resume to somebody in a management position in Toyota. He got the job. He's now a CPA at Toyota in Dallas. He's been there for 5 years now.
Wow.
So, you know, you can network online too. Doesn't hurt to reach out. Social media presence, again, professionalize it. You want to be professional. You don't want to come off like with all these pictures, having fun. Yeah, you can have fun, but just keep it clean and keep it professional, because future employers could check. You just never know. It's always better safe than sorry.
Great, thank you. So the next tip, number 4, is to prepare your Japanese. Now, there are some people who do not feel comfortable with their Japanese language skills, and that's perfectly fine. There are some people who are more well-versed in the culture, maybe the business manners. Maybe you're more familiar with, you know, the geography, and you can help with travel. I'm not saying that you need to know your Japanese language skills, and I actually want you to feel comfortable with that fact if you aren't interested in using your language skills. But if you are interested in using your language skills, then I do believe that that is absolutely going to help you with finding a job, because Japanese is a difficult language to learn. And at least here in the United States, there's not as many people learning a second language as there are in other countries. I really think it'll help you stand out. So as you're looking for a job, I want you to just keep in mind that you're going to polish the skills that you already have and not worry about, oh, I have to learn these new things. Just be comfortable with your current level. And if it includes business Japanese basics, like knowing how to write an email or on the phone if you're talking to somebody. And we know, most of us may know these typical phrases, especially if you are a CIR and working in a governmental office. Osewa ni narimasu is like the introduction to every single email you're ever going to write. And at the end of every email, you're going to say, dozo yoroshiku onegai shimasu. Just those two phrases, if you can memorize those, they're very helpful. But if you have taken a business course, brush up on that, or go online, just Google business Japanese, and you'll find some key phrases. Now, Japanese business manners, of course, is important, especially if you've worked in a school or an office. You know that how you present your meishi, your business card, is important. You know that, there's some kind of secret behind who sits where in the meeting room, and just to kind of figure it out. So you know that something like that exists. People are quieter. They say or hi, even though they're not really saying yes, they're taking in what you're saying. So there's a lot of listening going on. There's a lot of things you've already learned if you've lived in Japan. Do not take those skills for granted. That is extremely important. Conversation manners. There's a lot of listening. There's a lot of politeness. So there's a lot of being humble and mada benkyo, nihongo benkyo chu desu. You say these things like, I'm still not good with my Japanese. But the fact that you've experienced that, that's already put you a step above the rest because you know how to have these conversations. Now, extra credit, if you've ever used keigo or honorifics in any kind of business setting, absolutely wonderful, but don't feel stressed out if you don't know it. If you feel like challenging yourself, go ahead and study some, but again, it's not an absolute must. Another thing I do recommend is if you're looking for a position, any kind of job. Now, again, we're being open-minded, right? So kind of like when Faye Sensei mentioned the example of the person who found this position in a purchasing department and then was doing translation. That's because he was open-minded about what kind of positions he can use. It's almost as if the company kind of found a role and helped fit him in that role. So keep that in mind, you're open-minded, but it's also good to have an additional skill that you can promote. So if you were in college and you majored in in Japanese and perhaps something else, major or minor, you definitely want to focus on that as well and say that you have something else besides Japanese, especially if you're a double major in like engineering or accounting, marketing, things like that. If you don't have that skill, then I highly recommend, now is the time. We're kind of stuck at home. I know everybody's got different schedules. If you've got children, it's a different story, but there's so many courses being offered online right now. There's some that are for free, there's some that you have to pay for, but you can get some certification and you can show that you are learning another skill, and that is going to help you so much in your job search. And that's it for number 4. はい、次に行きましょう。
My skill has to be learning how to unmute myself. So job search tip number 5, we would really encourage you to think outside the box. You already in a way have, it isn't for everyone to say, I'm going to pick up and go live in Japan where I may or may not know anything about the language or the culture, and I'm going to teach people English, and maybe I don't even have teaching, credentials or training. So you are adventurous by definition, JET alums, and we have others who are willing to do study abroad and so on. So you've probably already done this, but in your job search as well, please think outside the box. It's important to be creative, forward-thinking, courageous, all those things that helped you go experience another culture overseas. Apply it to your job search. Brainstorm jobs. One of the things that is very important, especially in the current time, we are finding that many of the jobs that exist now, they didn't exist when I was a kid, let alone even 20 years ago. Search engine optimization. Wouldn't have ever known what that was, even in college. How about supply chain management? Like, wow, I think we all know how important that is now. It didn't exist when I was in college. So some of the jobs that will exist in 2, 4, 5 years don't even exist now. Change is happening all the time. So brainstorm jobs, but also look outside and see what other jobs are there that you may not have ever known about. be very aware, jobs rarely come to you. Even those stories that we told you about where it's like, wow, the person got a job, they reached out, did they not? And they also were open to, oh, gee, I would try purchasing, why not? Or whatever have you. So probably, especially in what I told you is now becoming a buyer's market, no one's gonna knock on your door and say, hi, we'd like to give you a paycheck, right? I wouldn't bet on it. So please think about what can you offer the company. But I have a little caveat on that. I always tell people, my advice is when you're looking for a job, don't think of it as a date. Think of it as marriage. Think of it as you want this to last a long time. And so it has to be a good match on both sides. That's why in an interview, if they ever say to you, do you have any questions? Is not a good answer. You see what I'm saying? It's like, oh, it's first date and I really don't want to know anything about you. You need to know, right? So think of something. What you need to do is find out, is that company or employer organization a good match for you as well? It has to be a two-way street or you will not be happy. You'll leave soon. And guess what? You'll be in the job hunt again, which, you know, again, is very challenging. So think about what you can offer to them and what can they do for you. Is it a good match? So in order to find out about them, one of the easy things you can do from the beginning is find their mission statement. Almost every organization worth its salt has a mission statement. It's often posted on their website or somewhere in their literature, and you should be acquainted with it. I often, when I apply for a job, I put it into my cover letter. I actually refer to it and say, you've got this. My mission is this. My driving theory actually happens to be Kaizen, continuous improvement. I'll mention that in my cover letter, because if they don't want a person like me, then don't even invite me to the interview, please. It's not going to work, right? So then, and then as we say at the very bottom, prepare to explain why you'd be a good match for them, right? And hopefully they can then see how you might be a good match. It has to be two-way, or like I said, you will be shortly looking again and frustrated, and guess what? You'll have something on your resume that says, oh, they only lasted a month, 2 months, 3 months, you know, whatever it was, a year. I don't know how long you can do gammon, but okay. So I think we have one more tip for you, Faye.
Job search tip number 6, use various forms of outreach. Go to the company, check out their website, see if they have specific job postings or applications. Doesn't hurt to look. And while you're there, just kind of see what kind of company it is. We have so many, like around 500 Japanese companies in Michigan alone, and Ohio has another couple hundred. I mean, we're great where we are, at least. I'm just speaking for Michigan, Ohio, but we've got a lot of companies, a lot of Japanese relations here in this state. Online job boards like nihongojobs.com. They give advice. They've got places that are looking for positions. Also, Great Lakes Jet AA posts jobs on their website. So if you are a Jet alumni and you're not on the Facebook page, get on the Facebook page, become a member. Sometimes it's word of mouth. You never know. Somebody might be working in a company and they know a position's open and you're friends with them and they tell you, and you know, it all works out. So you never know. Again, networking is very important. Again, with the Meishi, and what I try to do when I'm out and about in a social event with Japanese people and Americans, I talk to everybody. Introduce yourself. You know, people are interested to hear about your time in Japan or the fact that you're learning Japanese, whether they're Japanese or American. They find that interesting. It's a good topic. It's a good conversation starter also. Job fairs. So again, for those of you in Michigan, the Great Lakes Jet Alumni Association, Great Lakes Jet AA, does a job fair every year. This year it might be a little bit different due to COVID, but we invite Japanese companies. So I put out an email and I get them together on a certain day, usually in January, the end of January this is held. I've seen people get jobs through the job fair. There's times where they may be looking for interns. That can happen too. You just never know. Coming into a job fair, and even if you're not sure about a company, just come in and talk to them. It might be the perfect fit. You don't know. So like everybody's been saying, just stay open-minded and talk to people and get out there. Do your networking and come to the job fair. Again, it'll be posted on the Great Lakes Jet AA website when we do have it all planned out. So check it out.
Thank you. So we are at the end of our presentation, and here are just a couple of key points. One, to find a job that does or will eventually match your Ikigai. The key point here being is that you are happy somehow. And I know you can't always get a dream job right away. Sometimes it's a journey to get there, but keep that in mind that you are allowed to enjoy your career. The next one is to think outside the box. You know, be creative, tell people about what you want. You never know what an idea could lead to. The third one is to be prepared to gambaru, to do a little bit of, you know, some work. And I think that's important to keep in mind, especially now. You know, it's difficult to find a job. It's not easy. And what we're talking about, we make it sound so easy, but it's definitely not. You have to get out there. You have to put yourself out there. And sometimes it takes a really long time, especially depending on your, you know, your requirements for what you're looking for. But finally, dream big. Honestly, nothing is impossible. If there's one thing you can get out of this presentation, it's that all of us give you permission to take steps towards something that you really like to do. You are allowed to do so, and we really hope that you do. And before we get to the Q&A, Ann Sensei, if you wanted to give a little explanation here.
Certainly, after I unmute. We want to thank the various organizations and groups that supported us in our Japanese Jobs 101, and also this piece, I guess we can call it, this webinar. We are so excited, but as you can see, we, again, this was just an idea that Kasia and I came up with, and it evolved and grew, and you know, we just had to jump in and try it. And so we had a very good result, and how can I say, we could not have predicted that. Of course, we worked hard, we tried to do things very professionally and well, and so on and so forth, but people were so excited to join with us and collaborate. And so, you know, many hands and many voices. It was a wonderful experience. So again, try it out. You never know what can happen. I think we were very pleased. It was beyond our expectations.
Thank you. Casey, on to you.
That was a great presentation. I feel like you gave everyone a lot of different options for using Japanese. I'm gonna go ahead and jump right into the questions since we've gotten quite a few already. So the first couple of questions, I suppose, are asking about your study abroad experience, or, you know, doing your master's program in Japan. So what Japanese university did you study at? Was the program in Japanese, and what level of Japanese did you have to have for the program? So I guess everyone can answer this one.
The work study that I was on was through LCC, Lansing Community College, which unfortunately the program no longer exists. But at the time I had only like 2 years, maybe a year and a half of college Japanese at EMU. But I did take N3 when I was on the study abroad. But you've got JCMU, Japan Center for Michigan Universities. You've got Kansai Gaidai, which works with a lot of universities. And universities will usually work with different schools in Japan as well that are a good connection and good programs to go on.
Well, then I'll go next. I received the Monbusho MEX scholarship, and I was placed into a 6-month language program in Saitama. And then they put me into my 1-year research program at this women's university in Tokyo. The master's program was in that same university that I applied to. And it was an option for me because at the end of that 1.5 years on the MEX scholarship, and I don't know, I think it's a little bit different now. I'm not sure if you can renew just as much now, but at the end of that 1.5 years, I desperately wanted to stay longer in Japan. And after speaking with my professor at that university, she recommended that I apply to the master's program. And I just had to pass the exam with all the other Japanese language students. So I was, it did require a lot of Japanese language ability to do that because I was basically competing with the other Japanese students. However, we were able to use our dictionaries. So back then, this is like before any app available. I had my WAE, my Japanese English, my English Japanese, and my kanji dictionaries with me on the table, and everybody's like, "That's not fair." But I was like, "Hey, I need to understand the question first, and then figure out a way to answer it." So, it did require a level of Japanese that pushed me to my limit, but the time that I spent in that 1 year of research really helped. And then once I got accepted into the master's program, I had 2 years, and maybe they were kind with me and they said maybe she'll, you know, improve after 2 years. But during those 2 years, it was 100% Japanese. I listened to all lectures. I wrote all my homework. I started taking my notes in Japanese too, because my brain completely switched to it. And I was doing sociology in Japanese. And it was funny because when I started to talk about sociology in English, I really couldn't figure out how to say the words because I was so used to the Japanese. So I will never forget that experience. And I am so glad I did it because I think it helped my Japanese skyrocket. And as for which schools work with that, I think it depends, at least for me, on the MEXT scholarship. So go to your local consulate's website, look up MEXT, the Mombusha scholarship, and see. I'm not sure if you can select the school to go to. I think you can request it. I'm not sure if you're going to be guaranteed a placement there, but whatever school is on that program, I'm sure they will find a great way to work with you if that's something that you're interested in.
I did my graduate work in the States, so I don't know if mine is as relevant, but I did my master's degree at University of Michigan, and of course concentrated on things Japanese. And then when I did my PhD, I was determined not to include Japan in what I was going to study. I ended up studying comparative education, and I ended up studying Japanese education and doing my dissertation fieldwork in the same town where I was a jet because I knew all the principals and all the people. And so I just had a wonderful welcome there. And my dissertation actually in English, it's about 400 pages, sits in the local library in my hometown in Japan.
And then sort of a question going off of that, somebody asked what level of like the JLPT that you had passed and if that was necessary for like the jobs that you have now.
I have N2, but I'm a teacher, so it's not like they know anything about the JLPT test school. So.
Same for me. The most I've ever passed is N2, and that's a long time ago. But I think Kasia might have more to say about that.
I love the JLPT, but I also like a bunch of different exams. I did pass N1 back before. It was the different categorizations. I don't know if I would pass it again if I took it now because I was really hardcore studying, but I do think that the experience of having a test is very important. I don't know if it's necessarily 100% necessary for a job. I think it doesn't also test your speaking and listening, or speaking skills. So I actually wrote a 4-part blog post about the JLPT. So if you Google JLPT Ikigai Connections, you can get a lot more opinion on this topic from me than I have time to answer here. And by the way, if I may make it just a quick note, I'm kind of skimming through some of the comments, and some of you have mentioned, you know, comments individually to each of us. If we don't get to them from this conversation, please reach out to us. All of our information, we'll even plop it into the chat room as well. Please reach out to us and we can answer you specifically if we don't get to it to here. So thank you for your patience and understanding.
Yes, and we'll be sending out the webinar, and we'll include all of their contact information if you want to follow up. And they'll also be at the networking session too as well if you want to ask those questions. Here's another question, changing gears a little bit. In your opinions, what is the market for older jet or older people to get into these sorts of careers?
I guess I'm the oldest panelist, so maybe I should speak to that. I want to let you know, in case you didn't know, that actually even in Japan, the land of lifetime employment, mid-career changes are happening. And it's getting to be more common for someone to say, I'm tired of working for X corporation, even though I'm 45 and whatever, and they move across to whoever, you know. And so it's starting to happen. It's becoming, you know, it surprised me because that wasn't a common thing when I was in Japan many years ago. But in the US, I think we are even more willing to embrace, right? First of all, ageism. We cannot legally, I've worked in HR as well. It's illegal in the United States to discriminate based on age. So that's one thing. But the other thing, I think we just kind of have a more open mind toward, oh, well, you're 40 or better, right? Or 50 or better, whatever it may be. And so you actually come with a whole package of skills that the 20-something who I can probably pay a lot less, but they just simply don't have it. And sometimes I'm not interested in investing to make that person develop all those skills, and it takes a lot of time. So what I can tell you from my perspective is, and some would say I'm a rolling stone, but I am in a great job position as I consider it right now. I'm doing exactly what I want to do, which is I love teaching, but I only do it half-time. And I also love teaching about Japanese culture. And so that's what I do for the consulate. I'm in charge of their Facebook page, their newsletters. Now we have a YouTube channel. And so I'm gaining skills even now, 50 or better, and learning and doing things that I actually didn't even expect to do when I was hired there. And so what happened was, as my career moved on, you know, I could have stayed in a university where I was very happy. I worked there for 9 years, whatever. But I always felt the need to do something else and have the next challenge. So I think when you are a mid-career person, you need to think about and evaluate. I recommend making your resume at least once a year, because part of it is, you know, yes, to show other people what you can do, but part of it is, oh yeah, I can do that. And I did that too. And oh, that's right. And you forget sometimes. And now I actually work with people who are a lot younger than me. And it does remind me on a daily basis how much more they know about technology than I do, but also how much more I know just about a whole bunch of other things just from life experience. So, so just give yourself a chance, be open to it. And remember, you know a lot of things that it takes time and experience to learn.
If I may add to that, I think I'm actually finding myself supporting people who are just starting out with their careers, and they have so much trouble with showcasing their skills that they have. So people who are mid-career, who have come off the JET program X number of years ago, I think that your experiences are extremely important to companies that need somebody to come in and do the job right away. And yeah, you may need a week of orientation to learn how this company works, how this new industry works, but by having that JET experience in the past, and let's say if you want to pivot to a brand new kind of, you know, type of industry and role in your, you know, your next stage in life, I think although there may be some difficulties, of course, there's always difficulty in whatever you do. So we take difficulties and we eat them for breakfast. So just honestly, you just still, you have to showcase what you can offer a company that they know that they need, and they want somebody to come in and just do it right away. So see what skills you have that you can showcase that way.
That's some great advice. And for people who are looking through the chat box, we've added a lot of links to different resources for job networking. And then our speakers have also added their contact information in the chat box so that you can reach out to them. So I definitely would encourage you to check that out if you haven't looked at the chat box. Going to our next question. What are the best region areas in the US to seek jobs? And then also how, so I think you guys talked a little bit before about volunteering or turning hobbies into jobs. So how do you turn something that you do for a hobby like translation work or working with students and things like that into a paying job? Any advice on that?
Well, for the jobs in general, like as I mentioned before, the job fair that we hold here, it's a good start because we do have 500 some Japanese companies in Michigan, and Ohio has a couple hundred. I can't say, Boston's got this huge job fair going on in September, I believe. If anyone's interested in that, I know that's going to be virtual this year also. So check that out. But that's all that I can speak about is that.
Oh, well, I just wanted to jump in because, you know, since we're from Michigan, I tend to think in automotive terms, but as Kasia and I often assure the Michiganders that we speak to, it isn't all about automotive. There are Japanese companies doing a lot of different things. And I always talk about where I used to live in Battle Creek, Michigan, there was a chewing gum company. Lotte is there, and they're making chewing gum. So there's a lot of different things. Plus, we often mention it's not just you might work for a Japanese company, you might work for a company that supplies a Japanese company or, right, does business with a Japanese company. And so, or even just a global company, right? Because we talked about maybe you just like the international aspect. But it might be helpful, of course, to know that automotive companies do a lot. Toyota is the #1 car maker in the world now. And their headquarters recently moved to Plano, Texas. So they're there, but they're also in California and Michigan and lots of other places. Ohio actually, and sorry to correct you, Faye Sensei, but at the consulate we keep track of these things. There's almost 500 Japanese companies in Ohio as well. There's a little hair over 500 in Michigan. But also there's a place called Jetro that keeps track of these things, and you can actually see the map of the United States, and it will talk about who is the biggest foreign investor. And Japan is #1, 2, or 3 in over half of our states, well over half, I'd say at least 2/3, correct? So you can look into that. Actually, you know, if I were you, I'd pick the area that you prefer and then look, because really there are, you know, maybe like southeastern Idaho maybe doesn't have any, I don't know. But the point is almost everywhere in North America, you're going to be able to find a Japanese company. In fact, Kasia has a story of when she was living in Poland, all she was doing was visiting relatives, and literally in the middle of nowhere, this little town where her family's from, this man comes through and he's from Japan, and he says, oh, we're looking for someone to work in this television building factory or whatever in Poland, and she did it. I mean, so really, I would follow your bliss and say, I want to live in blah, blah, blah place, and then look. But go ahead if you have advice, Kasia.
Oh my goodness, I can talk about this forever, so I'll try to keep it very, very brief. One word of advice: look where the consulate general locations are, because where they are is usually where you have a population of Japanese people and companies, expats, etc. So for example, we have one in Michigan that represents Michigan, Ohio, I mean DC, New York, Boston. I know that there's got to be one of the Carolinas. I know out west, you know, California, Seattle. There's a lot of these locations that you can, just by finding the Consulate General of Japan in those locations, you can see, okay, here's a hub that I can start with. Now, the other thing I'm going to mention, because you can find a job, I think Ann Sensei gave some good advice, is find an area, a geographic area that you think you'd like to work with and start there, because it really can get overwhelming. However, now we've got this pandemic, right? And a lot of things are happening that are completely throwing all companies off kilter, especially in Japan too, with this work from home thing. And a lot of jobs are also turning remote. Now, not every company is going to immediately become 100% remote, because there is a benefit to working in place together with others. But there are also opportunities that are now coming up that are basically remote, and maybe in the future they'll become more, you know, centralized, that you have to go to the actual company. I actually also did a webinar. I did it in Japanese. If you want to hear my definitely not peta Japanese, but talking in Japanese about online opportunities. I talk about, it can be, you know, freelancing, going on to like Fiverr or any kind of company where you can offer some skills and start working a little bit on the side of doing what you want to do. If you want to do translation, interpretation, mostly translation, there's also websites that are specifically designed to that. But granted, you become a, you know, your own employee, so you have to worry about lots of things that entrepreneurs have to worry about. And of course, then there's the entrepreneurial route as well that you can consider. But the times are changing. Maybe a lot of things are going to become, you know, remote, and who knows what's going to happen. So kind of just, I think doing research online is definitely helpful. And I know it's going to be a little bit confusing, but always feel free to reach out, and maybe we can help guide you in the right direction.
That was a great answer. And we also had a question about how it's affecting the pandemic. So I think that that gave a good way to sort of work around that and look for more, you know, remote opportunities. So another question is how to, if you're not a native speaker of Japanese, what is some ways that you can stand out, especially if you're looking for a job, maybe where there is a lot of Japanese speakers, or you're looking for a job in Japan. what are some ways that you can stand out on your resume or to a potential hiring company?
I can start because I love this topic. Again, I'll try not to sabotage everybody's time, but networking. If you are a non-native if you're non-Japanese, you want a Japanese job, one of the best things you can do is network. I know now it's really hard, but you can still do things online. You can still have Zoom calls like Ann Sensei mentioned in her job tips slide. It's about connections, it's about relationships. So if you don't know anybody, then get involved in some kind of maybe Japan America Society event, go to a cultural event, see the consulate's website, see if there's any kind of matsuri that's happening online. Maybe you can offer to volunteer for that just to get to know people. Slowly but surely you can get these connections. And then I would say just be completely honest and tell people, hey, do you know anybody who's hiring? You know, you can use your Japanese skills, and you're talking in Japanese. It doesn't matter what level you are. You're showing the initiative. And I think that that will be extremely helpful to get you this in. Of course, taking the JLPT exam, which is not happening in America for this December, but there's also the BJT, which I think in California, or I'm sorry, New York, maybe Chicago and California, I believe you can take it. It still tests some of your business Japanese skills. The JLPT is not, you have to have it to get a job. It's just an option that you can use, but you can still study for it. You can still take the practice exams that are for free on the JLPT website. And that's a way to improve, but use your Japanese and network. Those are my 2 tips.
May I just throw in, and I just typed it in the chat, I have found that more and more Japanese conversation groups, such as meetup.com and other ones by universities and so on, so many are going online now. So you literally can be having a conversation group with people in Washington State and Texas and Florida and wherever, and some of them are native Japanese speakers. The participants are not only non-natives, right? I think the vast majority are, but they're all different walks of life. Some Japanese enjoy speaking to us. One fellow I know, he actually works at a recruitment company. And so on his own time, he goes and sponsors these meetups, meetup.com Japanese conversation groups. And what does he do? He finds talent, right? I mean, he necessarily gets to know the people and he just has a good time. But I'm sure when he finds a really interesting candidate, he says, oh, by the way, I heard about this job or whatever. The other place that I found is great networking is Japan America societies. You have a lot of business people and people in government and so on, and they're both Americans and Japanese, but they are definitely working together. They're often from organizations that are global organizations. And so if you just look up for your local, Japan America Society online, they're starting to do a lot of things online as well. I recently, and again, I'm in Michigan, but the Japan American Society of Georgia had this fantastic thing in the summer. It was a summer camp for kids, and it was all online, and it was, I think, free. And so I was telling people about it all over the place, and I think people from everywhere are being able to tap into these resources that previously they would not have been able to. So
it's a great answer. Okay, so it looks like we're running a little over on time, so we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. For more of the industry specific questions, I would definitely encourage you to come to our networking session. And I believe I reposted all of those links because we'll be dividing out by industry. And so it'll be a chance to have more in-depth conversation about those types of topics. I'd also encourage you to reach out to our speakers if you have a specific question for someone about their experience, or you would just like to talk a little bit more. And we'll also be sending all that information when we get the recording of the webinar up as well. I'd like to thank everyone for coming, especially our speakers. Thank you all for speaking, Faye and Kasia and Ann. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their evening. Yeah, so it looks like a few people joined late, but yes, we will be sending this out to everyone, and we'll be sending the links and everything as well. So have a great night, everyone.
Find your Ikigai.
I hope to see you guys in the next networking session.